I grew up in Modesto back in the 80s, running with a pretty rough crowd. Honestly, it was the kind of life with only one ending, either jail time or the grave. Luckily, I saw the writing on the wall, told myself, enough is enough, and decided to turn my life around. Driving was my thing, so I got a job at the local cab company, a decent way to make an honest living and cruise around my favorite city. By 1991, I was 25 and had been rolling through the streets of Modesto for nearly 2 years. The job itself was a mess, but the cool thing was that sometimes I'd pick up the real ones, people who looked like they had a story just waiting to be told. Like one night, this small guy with a raspy voice flagged me down. After he settled in the back, I started chatting him up. Turns out, it was none other than Sonny Barger, one of the notorious founding members of the Hells Angels. I immediately had to ask, a legend like you should be on a Harley. Man, why the taxi? He looked up, fixed me with a sharp gaze in the rearview mirror, and deadpanned, because I've had 14 beers and 5 tequilas, and I'm too old to spend a night in the slammer. I couldn't help myself. I burst out laughing. The guy was a total character. And by the way, he was the most generous tipper I'd ever had. Gotta hand it to the Hells Angels. But being a cab driver wasn't always a stream of cool encounters. The truth is, I've also had passengers who got me into some serious trouble, and this ride was one of them. It was August 10th, 1991, around 8:30 p.m. The sun had just set, and I was cruising on the boulevard, about to turn onto Highway 108 toward downtown. It was Friday. I knew it was going to be a crazy night. I was just about to flip my turn signal when my eye caught something. A girl, standing on the dark shoulder of the road, hitchhiking. My first thought was a major alarm bell. Hitchhiking in this area, at this time, on a Friday night? That's trouble. Everyone knew Modesto got dangerous once the sun went down. Still, I pulled over and gave a little honk. She rushed to my door. Before I could even ask, "Where to?" she practically pleaded. "I don't have any money. I'm sorry. I really, really need a ride." Her voice was thin, shaky. I could tell she had been crying hard. Her eyes were red and puffy, her face streaked with tear stains. She looked like a lost, desperate little animal seeking shelter. Instead of the heartless driver who should have just kept going, something in me clicked. I told her, "Hop in. I'll take you for free." Her face registered pure shock. She burst out, "Oh my God, really? Thank you so much." Tears were threatening again. She quickly got into the back seat and gave me directions to the airport. After introducing myself, I asked her name and started checking in, just asking if she was okay, just so she knew there was someone listening in the car. She told me she had just ended a 3-year relationship and was running away to Florida, where her grandparents lived. I offered my apologies, then tried to comfort her by saying she wasn't alone. I told her she'd be surprised how many broken-hearted young women I drove every week. Breakups suck, and when they happen, people usually just want to say, "Get me out of this damn place," and that's where I came in. She didn't laugh, but I didn't expect her to. After the lame joke, I offered, "If you want to talk about it, I'm here to listen." It took her a minute to compose herself. She started the story slowly, as if sorting through the chaos in her head. But once she got going, the words tumbled out. I stayed quiet and let her talk. She had moved from the East Coast to California for college, met her boyfriend her junior year, and moved in with him after graduation. In the beginning, he was perfect, a total gentleman. He supported her emotionally and financially while she struggled to find a job after school. He was kind and patient, always. But then, things changed. She said he became increasingly impatient and mean-spirited. From never arguing, they were now fighting 2 or 3 times a week. Her field was competitive, and despite her best efforts to send out resumes, the continuous failure was too much for her boyfriend. He treated it as a huge source of stress because she wasn't contributing. Everything came to a head when she started looking at waitressing jobs. He just didn't care anymore. He snapped, told her to pack her bags, started throwing her stuff around, and the violence began. The fight ended brutally, and she barely escaped the house with the suitcase she had already packed. My own father used to beat my mother before he left, so as soon as she said that, my inner hero came roaring out. I was ready to turn the car around, track down that ex-boyfriend, and give him a piece of my mind before driving her to the airport. I told her I was so sorry things ended violently, and asked if she was okay, if she needed to stop at a hospital. She said no, that he hadn't hurt her, but when I asked if she wanted to stop and call the police, she let out a sharp, desperate no immediately. That was the first red flag, the one that made me seriously rethink the situation. That no wasn't just a refusal. It snapped out of her mouth, cold and hard like a slap. My brain, which had been buzzing with heroism, suddenly stalled. I tried to explain that if he hit her or smashed up the place, it was important to call the police, at least to file a report. But she just insisted, "Please, just get me to the airport. I have to see my grandparents." At the time, I tried to be sympathetic, or at least I thought I was. The poor girl was in shock. She didn't want the hassle of detailing everything to a bunch of nosy cops. She just wanted out. But like I said, that no was too desperate, too definite. It didn't sound like a victim who just wanted to forget. It sounded like someone trying to cover something up. I tested her. Had she fought back? And was that why she was afraid of the law? I quickly reassured her that the police would surely consider it self-defense. She shook her head, muttering that they wouldn't see it that way. But when I pressed her, "Why not?" she yelled back at me, her tone changing completely. She was steel hard. "Because they won't. Okay? Now. Just take me to the airport. Please, I'm begging you." She started with cold anger, but ended with a plea. The scared little girl again. That whiplash change softened me, but it wasn't enough to shake the feeling of dread. I stayed silent for a moment, letting her catch her breath. Then I suggested, "If that guy hit you, the sweetest revenge is putting him in the slammer for a night." Immediately, she mumbled, her voice almost an exhale of air, "That's not going to happen." I didn't get the implication, so I inadvertently pushed a step further. "Are you seriously going to let the son of a bitch get away with it?" And then she said it. The voice was low, flat, and so chilling it made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. She said, "He's not going to hurt anyone else." Bingo. Their fight had ended violently. Yes, but this girl wasn't the only victim. It ended because she did something to him, and the way she talked about him, not hurting anyone else. It told me this was way beyond a slap. Pieces of the story, the packed suitcase, the tears, the refusal to call the police, slammed into my mind. This wasn't a girl fleeing an assault. This was a person fleeing the consequences. The moment that truth hit me, the air in the cab froze. The feeling suddenly became thick, heavy, and a slow motion chill started creeping up from my gut. I was driving a fugitive. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Ma'am, if you've done something really bad, I have to stop the car and let you out. Otherwise, I become an accomplice." I wasn't sure if the law was exactly like that, but the thought was heavy enough to act on. I pressed, "If you just threw things, or did something in self-defense, I'll take you. But if you left him bleeding and needing emergency help, that's a different story. As I waited for an explanation, I heard a slight, soft rustle in the back seat. My eyes immediately glued themselves to the rearview mirror. I saw her hand reaching inside her jacket. Just a split second before the cold flash of metal appeared, I heard it, the dry, unmistakable click-clack of a handgun being racked. I'd been robbed 3 times in my 2 years on the job, so I knew that sound better than any song. And then, the final truth materialized. The girl I thought was a poor victim of domestic violence had pulled a gun and was pointing it right at my back. What happened next? I didn't even think, but the words, "Come on, lady, don't do anything stupid," just spilled out of my mouth. My voice sounded thin, strained. Then, that same shaky, almost crying voice came from the back seat. "Just drive me to the airport, please. I don't want to hurt you, so don't make me. I just want to get out of here." I didn't dare ask another question. God, I wanted to know, but I knew my life was worth more than any answer. In my mind, I pictured a poor guy lying on a kitchen floor, bleeding out from a gut wound. Maybe a woman beating creep deserved to suffer, but I don't believe in the death penalty. I long to know, more than anything, if a life was fading away in a pool of blood, because if it were me, I'd want someone to call an ambulance. I did call someone, but that was later, and I probably should get back to the main story. So, I just drove. I barely breathed, let alone spoke a word. I was absolutely terrified, and I won't pretend otherwise. This girl had all but admitted to shooting someone, and I had a terrible feeling she'd do it again if I got in her way. Plus, the thought of going to Florida to see her grandparents sounded too innocent. A fresh murderer would be booking a flight to South America, I figured. I drove her straight to the airport in heavy silence. As we neared the drop-off area, she told me to stop the car. She'd walk the rest of the way in. I did what I was told, pulling over into a dark corner, well away from the traffic. Then, she casually asked me to turn off the car and hand over the keys. I took a chance. She wouldn't shoot me right here next to all these people. At first, I refused. "I can't do that, lady. This is my livelihood." But then, for just a moment, she let the real person show, and the look in her eyes froze the blood in my veins. I turned my head slightly, about to say I'd keep her secret, and she jammed the gun right into my face. I don't mean aimed, I mean jammed. She pushed the muzzle so hard against my temple it actually stung my skin, and she snarled, "Give me the keys." In a desperate instant, I tried one last appeal to her conscience. I pleaded, "You can't steal a man's livelihood. How am I supposed to feed my kids without my car?" I didn't have any kids, but I'd say anything to keep those keys. She didn't let me finish the sentence, "You can't," before she erupted. She screamed, manic, that I wasn't allowed to lecture her, that all men were the same, always thinking they had the right to control women, and she wouldn't stand for it anymore. Then she repeated, ice cold, the keys, or I'd never go home to my non-existent children again. I wasn't an idiot. I knew the only sensible thing to do was to shut up and obey. I gave her the keys. I watched her slide out of the seat, dragging the suitcase after her. Then she walked straight toward the terminal, looking as pitiful and harmless as she had when I first picked her up. I waited until she was completely out of sight. Then I sprinted into the terminal, found a payphone, and dialed 911, constantly glancing over my shoulder. I knew there might be airport security inside, but I was terrified she'd return. I didn't want to risk catching a bullet when I could call the police from outside that immediate area. I was stranded. She'd taken the keys, so I just huddled outside the terminal waiting for the police to arrive. But by the time they showed up, it was too late. The girl was already on the first flight out, the Bahamas, or wherever the hell she was going. She had managed to ditch the gun, obviously. But she didn't forget to take my car keys with her. I had to get a jump start to drive the cab home. The car was pretty much dead until the company got a new key made. But I was alive, Ashram. And God, that feeling of survival, of still having a pulse after having a lunatic in your back seat, it was truly amazing. What happened next? I used to manage a small chain of late-night diners in Minnesota. Over the years, I saw my fair share of odd events. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the night I'm about to tell you about. I wasn't actually there when it happened, but two of my most trusted employees were. Our diner was a cozy, old-fashioned place just off the highway. It was open around the clock, surrounded by empty fields, dense woods, and a lonely stretch of road. Usually, it was the kind of spot where nothing really happened, until one night, everything changed. John and Nora had been with us for years. John was our night cook, a reliable guy in his 40s, married with 2 kids, always steady as a rock. Nora was the waitress, quick-witted, tough, and a master at handling rowdy crowds, despite being a single mom in her 20s. They both knew the ins and outs of the place and could handle just about anything. But nothing could have prepared them for what happened that night. It was one of those harsh Minnesota winter nights. The wind was howling, rattling the diner windows like it wanted to come inside and warm up. I was fast asleep at home when the phone rang, jolting me awake. It was the police. Instantly, my heart started pounding. They told me something had happened at the diner, and they needed to see the security tape. They didn't tell me much, just that it was serious, and that John and Nora were involved. That uncertainty alone was terrifying. I threw on some clothes, my mind racing with worry as I drove through falling snow to the diner. Was it a robbery? A fight? I tried to come up with any explanation that made sense, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to witness. When I arrived, a single police officer met me outside. We walked together through the silent, dimly lit diner to the back office, where the old security TV and VCR sat, gathering dust. The officer said he'd have to take the tape as evidence, but first, he wanted to watch it so he'd know exactly what happened. My hands were shaking as I rewound the tape to 2:30 the time he mentioned. I pressed play, and the screen flickered to life. The image on the screen was quiet at first, deceptively peaceful. John was in the kitchen, his back to the camera, scrubbing down the counters with steady, practiced movements. Nora was out front, wiping down tables in the soft glow of the neon lights. The whole diner seemed still, almost suspended in time. Then, the front door swung open. 2 men walked in, youngish, maybe late 20s or early 30s, bundled in faded jeans and thick jackets, and at first glance, they looked like any other travelers seeking a break from the cold. But even through the grainy footage, something about their demeanor sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't their clothes, it was their faces. One had a sprawling tattoo that crept from his neck up across his cheek and temple, a dark mess of ink. The other had eyes that were just wrong, cold, empty, almost lifeless, like 2 black stones set in his skull. They acted normal, calm, almost too calm. They sat down at the counter, and Nora, ever the pro, took their order like nothing was amiss. John cooked with his back to them while Nora delivered their plates. The men ate in silence, heads down, barely speaking. My whole body was tense as I watched, silently begging them to just finish their meal and leave. But they didn't. Suddenly, the one with the tattoo reached into his hoodie and, in a motion so smooth it barely registered, pulled out a handgun. The other man followed suit. The sight of those two guns pointed at John and Nora made my heart leap into my throat. Both froze. Nora with her eyes wide and mouth open, John with his hands in the air, trembling so hard it showed on the tape. The two men didn't shout or rush. They signaled for John and Nora to come out from behind the counter. The employees stumbled forward on shaky legs. Nora clung to the counter for a heartbeat before letting go. Then, the men led them to the back, toward the walk-in fridge. My mind tried to make sense of it. They'd lock them inside, raid the register, then run. That's how these things go. But what happened next didn't fit any script I knew. Once they'd shoved John and Nora inside, the two men stepped in after them and pulled the heavy door shut. The camera angle stayed fixed on that solid metal door. 5 minutes passed. 10, 20. I fast-forwarded, pausing every so often, but the door never moved. The questions started spinning in my mind. Why would they go in? 2. What were they doing in there? 37 minutes is a long time to be locked in a freezer with two armed strangers. The tape gave no answers, just that blank, immovable doors. Finally, after exactly 37 minutes, the door opened. The two men strolled out, looking relaxed, straightening their jackets. The tattooed one adjusted his hoodie. The other scanned the empty diner with those blank eyes. They didn't even glance at the register or the safe. They didn't take a thing, not a cent, not a plate of food. Without a word, they walked out into the snowy night and vanished. I sat there next to the officer, my palms slick with sweat, my heart pounding. No robbery, no violence we could see. But John and Nora were left in that freezer for over half an hour with those men. And whatever happened in there, it left a mark. They weren't physically hurt, but something inside them had cracked. I could see it later, in their eyes. Whatever those men did, it was more than enough to haunt them. The tape kept rolling, each minute dragging by in that heavy silence. About 15 minutes later, one of our regulars wandered in, a trucker who always showed up for coffee at weird hours. His coat was dusted with snow, and you could see him looking around, probably thinking, "Where the hell is everyone?" He waited for a bit. Then curiosity got the better of him. He slipped behind the counter and wandered into the back, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness. He checked everywhere, the stockroom, the restrooms, everywhere except the walk-in fridge. The tension was almost too much. He was so close. Finally, after 10 or 15 minutes of searching, he cracked open the fridge door and peeked inside. You couldn't see his face at first, but you could tell the exact moment he saw something. He jerked back, stumbling, like someone had punched him. Another camera caught his face as he staggered away, and I'll never forget it. A look of pure horror, the kind you only see on someone who's just seen a ghost. With shaking hands, he fumbled for his phone, dialing 911 in a panic. But even then, he had the presence of mind to dart over and turn off the grills so the place wouldn't burn down. Bless him for that. He spent the next few minutes pacing, talking frantically on the phone, glancing over his shoulder at the fridge like he expected some nightmare to burst out at any moment. A couple of minutes later, 2 cops arrived. They spoke to the trucker, then made their way to the fridge. One of them nudged the door open with his boot and called out. That's when Nora stumbled out, her hands plastered over her eyes, shaking so hard the officer had to catch her. John came out right after, his own hands tight over his face, moving like he wasn't sure he even wanted to leave the walk-in. As the cops tried to guide him away, John suddenly twisted around, still covering his face, and lunged for the fridge. They had to physically pull him back. He was fighting, desperate to get back into that freezing box like it was the only safe place left. While the police tried to calm John, Nora collapsed into a booth, curling up, her hands still shielding her eyes. Eventually, they managed to sit John down as well, but both of them just sat there, silent and catatonic, refusing to look at anyone or anything. It was chilling to watch. Whatever happened in that fridge had broken something deep inside them. A little while later, the EMTs arrived. They spoke gently to John and Nora and led them out to an ambulance. Even outside, they kept their hands clamped over their faces. The tape showed me bursting in next, coat half buttoned, worry etched all over my face. When the tape finally stopped, I felt sick to my stomach. I turned to the detective, desperate for answers. He just shrugged. John and Nora were in shock and wouldn't talk. No injuries, no marks, no signs of a struggle. My guess, he said, was as good as his. Whatever those men did, it shattered them inside. I left the diner in a fog, heartbroken for John and Nora. I tried to visit them in the hospital, but the staff wouldn't let me. I called their homes in the days that followed, but neither one wanted to talk. Within a few weeks, they both quit. I heard that John moved to California, leaving his wife and kids behind. His wife told me he was a wreck, barely talking, barely sleeping, until one day, he just disappeared. Nora ended up on a farm in Iowa with her family. Her mom said she was doing better, but she only spoke in short, clipped sentences. The police report was useless, just a strange event. No details. The diner was never the same after that. Rumors spread like wildfire. Gang initiation, twisted game, government conspiracy. No one really knew. Only John and Nora did. And the not knowing made it so much worse. Customers stopped coming at night, and honestly, I didn't blame them. I hated being there myself. I hired a night guard, installed panic buttons, triple-checked the cameras, but it all felt pointless. The damage was done. Time moved on. We hired new people, and eventually, the night crowd trickled back. But I never forgot. Sometimes I'd watch that security tape at home, letting those 37 minutes play out, over and over. Sometimes it passed in a blur, and other times it felt endless. Were those men still out there? What could they have done in that little room to break John and Nora so completely? Eventually, I stopped watching the tape. I forced myself to stop asking questions. Some things, I think, you're just better off not knowing. I've been working as a security guard at a factory complex in Detroit for about 6 months now. It's not the greatest job in the world, but it pays the bills. And that's good enough for me. The place itself is a faded memory of better days, a relic. It used to be a huge auto parts factory, buzzing with activity, but now most of the buildings are empty, crumbling, and silent. Only a couple of areas are still running, their machines humming quietly through the cold Michigan nights. My shift runs from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Most nights, it's just me, the deserted buildings, and the constant scurrying of rats in the shadows. Staying awake is its own challenge. but you get used to it. Every night starts the same way. I make a slow round, checking the perimeter and making sure every door is locked. Then it's back to my tiny, lonely office, a battered chair, a thermos of coffee, and the soft glow of security monitors. It's dull, but honestly, that's what I want. A boring shift means a peaceful night. Every few hours, I force myself to do another walk, flashlight sweeping the darkness, just for something to do. It's a paycheck, and that's what matters. But then, one night, everything changed. It was one of those brutal Michigan nights, so cold it hurt to breathe. I was on my third cup of coffee, still feeling the drag of a bad night's sleep. I was staring at the cameras, watching the same flickers of static and shadow, when something caught my eye on camera 3, over by the back loading dock. A shape. There were about 4 or 5 of them, all wearing cheap masks they'd just grabbed at some Halloween store. But I knew right away they were young, the way they moved, full of nervous, twitchy energy, like a pack of wild animals having a fit. One of them shoved me hard, making me stumble back, my heart hammering against my ribs, nearly dropping the flashlight. Before I could even process what was happening, another one punched me straight in the gut. The blow was absolutely savage, knocking the wind out of me, a deep, wrenching pain that doubled me over. While I was still trying to gasp for air, they swarmed. All of them descended on me, a whirlwind of fists and feet, a pack of beasts focused on nothing but their own vicious fun. I tried to fight back, swinging the flashlight and catching one of them, but they were too fast. One of them snatched the light, sending it clattering into the darkness, and then another punched me square in the face. I heard the sickening, bone-chilling crack of my nose breaking, and the hot, metallic taste of fresh blood flooded my mouth. It started pouring down my face, running back into my sinuses, a thick, coppery river. I tried to scream, to yell for help, but the blows kept raining down, a relentless assault that drove me to my knees. A kick sent my legs collapsing, and I fell sprawling, the gravel digging into my knees and palms. But even when I was on the ground, they didn't stop. Kicks landed repeatedly on my ribs, my back, my arms. I could only curl up, trying to shield my head, but it did little good. The pain was everywhere, like I was on fire. Yet, the worst part wasn't the physical pain. It was their laughter. That loud, insane cackle echoed through the empty factory corridors, as if they were performing on a stage. They were laughing like this was the best thing in the world. It was a sick, twisted sound that chilled me more than the cold or the fear. They acted like children, but the kind of cruel children who would pull the wings off a fly just to watch it suffer. That's what frightened me the most, that casual, gleeful cruelty. The way they just didn't care. The way they seemed to be enjoying it so much. It felt like an eternity, though it must have only been a few minutes. Then, one of them brought something hard, very hard, down on the back of my neck. It was the final blow. Everything went out, a sudden void, like someone had flipped a switch and the world had vanished. When I woke up, it was still dark and still cold. My face was pressed against the rough, unforgiving gravel, and my head was throbbing with a dull, persistent ache. My mouth tasted like rust and blood. I tried to move, but my entire body screamed in protest. My ribs were on fire with every shallow breath, and my hands were useless, stiff, swollen, and numb. I spat out blood and a few small, hard fragments of my teeth. They had really done a number on me. The kids were gone. No sign of them, just my ripped coat And my missing shoes. My Air Jordans 96, the ones I'd saved forever to buy. I fumbled for my wallet, and surprisingly, it was still in my back pocket. They didn't want money, they just wanted to hurt me. Slowly, shakily, I got to my feet. Every step sent a fresh shock of agony up my legs and through my body. I was dizzy, the world pitching and swaying, leaning against the cold brick wall of the factory. I started to stumble back toward the guard shack. It felt like a mile away. I tripped, my legs weak and unsteady, my ribs stabbing me with every gasping breath. Finally, I reached the office. I collapsed into the chair, my body utterly spent, and reached for the phone. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. I mumbled something about being attacked and managed to give them the address. And then I just waited, trying to stay conscious. The paramedics arrived quickly, their flashing lights a ridiculously cheerful sight in the darkness. They put me on a stretcher, their faces grim when they saw my condition. At the hospital, they asked me what happened, but my jaw was too swollen and my throat too constricted to talk. I stayed there for several days, wrapped in bandages and hooked up to machines. The doctor said I had broken ribs, a concussion, cracked fingers, and a severely battered face. They had to extract a few more teeth and said I was lucky it wasn't worse. I didn't feel lucky at all. The police stopped by, an older one and a younger one. They asked for a description, but I had nothing to give. I just told them about the masks, the way they laughed, that wild energy. They took notes, said they'd look into it, but I never heard from them again. I knew they wouldn't find those kids. There's too much darkness around here to hide in. When I finally got home, my body still ached. I couldn't go back to work. I had 2 kids depending on me, and I didn't know how I was going to pay the bills. My daughter, who was 8, cried when she saw me all bruised up. My son, 12, tried to be tough, but I could see the fear in his eyes. I told them I had an accident at work, not wanting them to know the truth. My sister, a nurse, brought over food and helped me change the dressings. I hated feeling so reliant on her, feeling useless, like I couldn't even take care of myself. I kept thinking about that night, playing it over and over. Why? Why did they do it? I was just doing my job. It made no sense. My boss called, said they were very sorry and would be beefing up security, maybe adding another guard. It was a hollow promise. When I finally went back to work, the other guards clapped me on the shoulder, said they were glad I was okay, but I saw the worry in their eyes, the silent realization that the next one could be any of them. The police never caught those kids. They never will, I'm sure of it. That eats at me, thinking they just got away with it so easily. I'm stuck with the scars, with this constant fear. Life isn't fair, I guess. Now I'm more cautious, always looking over my shoulder, always anticipating trouble. Maybe that's a good thing, keeping me on my toes. But it also showed me how fast things can go bad, and you can't always stop it. I just keep going for my kids, for myself, because I have no other choice. It was a beautiful spring evening, promising a quiet, peaceful night. The moon was full. The air was crisp, casting a glow over the unassuming Exxon gas station on Sternberg Road in Norton Shores, Michigan. At this hour, this place seemed absolutely safe. For 25-year-old mother Jessica Hinga, it was just another late-night shift. She was a familiar face in the neighborhood, a devoted mother to her 3-year-old son, Zine, and soon to be married to her fiancé. Dakota Quayle Dyer. Jessica was known for her bright smile, her relentless hard work, and her dream of becoming an accountant. It wasn't unusual for her to work the night shift alone. Norton Shores was a close-knit community with an extremely low crime rate. With the Fruitport police station just a few minutes' drive away, this sense of security was a deep-seated habit, never once questioned. The clock was nearing 11 p.m. A regular customer pulled into the gas station lot. The engine cut, and the typical late-night silence resumed. He walked inside, habitually expecting Jessica's bright smile and her "hello," but the counter was empty. He figured she was simply in the restroom, so he waited patiently. But as the minutes passed, the silence in the store was no longer peaceful. It began to shift into something unsettling. A cold sense of unease ran down his spine. As a regular who knew the night clerk well, he suddenly felt a baseless dread, a gut feeling that something was profoundly wrong. Driven by instinct, he stepped around the counter and looked into the back area. On the small folding table, Jessica's purse, jacket, and personal belongings were all there. But Jessica was gone. He called her name, his voice echoing, lost in the empty space. No answer. A knot of fear tightening in his stomach, he frantically searched the store, checking every aisle, every hidden corner. Finally realizing this was no longer a restroom break, but an emergency far beyond his handling, he did the only thing a person could do. He called the police. Within minutes, the sirens arrived. A meticulous search of the entire premises was conducted. The first thing that chilled them was the complete absence of any signs of a struggle. The store was eerily clean and organized, as if Jessica had simply walked out the back door voluntarily. No knocked-over shelves, no broken glass, nothing to suggest a confrontation. This forced the officers to consider a difficult hypothesis. Had Jessica willingly left, and had she taken money? Unpleasant as it was, they had to check. When they opened the register, the entire $400 in cash and change was intact, untouched. The safe was also locked, if no property was missing, and all of Jessica's personal belongings were left behind. Then where did she go? That was the chilling question that haunted investigators from the very first moments. Jessica's sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through Norton Shores, a quiet community unaccustomed to such a terrifying event. Her family was devastated. Her mother, Shelley Hinga, tearfully told reporters, her voice full of heartbreaking hope, "I know she's out there, waiting for us to find her. I just want my baby girl back. This is a nightmare we can't wake up from. We just need answers." Jessica's fiancé, Dakota, shared his grief at a candlelight vigil. With tears welling up, he said, "I just want her home. I miss her. And our son misses his mom. Every day is a struggle, but we will never give up. Jessica is out there somewhere, and we have to find her." The Norton Shores Police Department immediately launched an investigation, but they quickly faced a massive hurdle: a critical lack of physical evidence. The first thing that stunned investigators was the fact that the gas station had no surveillance cameras inside. The owner innocently explained that he didn't feel the need for aggressive monitoring in such a peaceful area. This subjective mistake made the case exponentially harder to solve. With no footage, police resorted to using tracking dogs to follow Jessica's scent. However, her trail abruptly ended at the edge of the parking lot, confirming one horrible fact: she had been abducted and taken away by car. The one small, while grim, piece of evidence found was a tiny spot of blood outside the back door. Later confirmed to be Jessica's, a terrifying indication of serious foul play. Day turned into day, and then week turned into week, and the investigation gradually hit a complete dead end. Not a single witness came forward. Not a single solid lead was found. Large-scale searches in the area yielded no sign of Jessica. The case slowly went cold, leaving her family in utter agony, trapped in an endless wait, not knowing if she, for nearly 3 years, Jessica's fate was a haunting puzzle, weighing on the collective conscience of Norton Shores. The unsolved case lingered like a whispering ghost on the once quiet streets. But in 2016, a seemingly unrelated incident injected a spark into the cold case, revealing a darkness deeper than anyone had dared to imagine. One April afternoon, a 16-year-old girl in Muskegon County was walking home when a silver minivan pulled up alongside her. The man inside rolled down his window, offering her a ride with a chillingly friendly demeanor. Her instinct told her to run. As he attempted to lure her into the vehicle, her quick thinking allowed her to escape. She immediately fled and reported the incident to the police, providing a detailed description of both the suspect and the van. This report led police to Jeffrey Willis, a 46-year-old factory worker with no prior criminal record. But what investigators found when they searched his silver Chrysler minivan and his home was a bone-chilling glimpse into a sick, premeditated crime. The vehicle not only matched the 16-year-old's description perfectly, but it also matched a suspicious van seen near the Exxon station on the night Jessica vanished. And then, the scene inside the van was enough to curdle the blood of veteran officers. Handcuffs, ropes, chains, and leather restraints. Willis brazenly justified these items as perfectly legal. He also owned a handgun, insulin, Viagra, and plastic gloves, things he insisted were personal items. But clearly, nothing about this was normal. But the most damning evidence wasn't in the van. It was on his laptop computer. Forensic experts found a file simply labeled VIX, short for victims. When they opened it, the horror began. Inside were 2 subfolders, codenamed JLH and RB. Opening the RB folder, and they found a disturbing collection of photos of a woman named Rebecca Blech. Rebecca had been shot 3 times in the back of the head. Her body found just over a year after Jessica's disappearance. Initially suspected of being a traffic accident, the autopsy revealed the cruel truth. It was a savage murder. Willis's arrest and the seizure of the computer finally ended Rebecca's family's agonizing wait for justice. But that wasn't all. Willis's VIX folder didn't just contain Rebecca's social media photos. It also housed thousands of torture and death videos, snuff films. These files exposed a morbid obsession with violence, a chilling testament to a mind twisted by its darkest desires. And then, the truth about the JLH folder landed like a fatal blow. It contained dozens of pictures of Jessica Hinga. More terrifyingly, the folder creation date was April 26, 2013, the very day she vanished from the Exxon station. Jeff Willis immediately became the prime suspect in Jessica's disappearance. Naturally, the evidence began to pile up. Surveillance footage from a neighboring business, a detail missed for years, was finally found, capturing his silver minivan speeding away from the Exxon station on Sternberg Road around 11 o'clock p.m. that night. Furthermore, the police sketch drawn from a witness's description of a suspicious man near the gas station that night bore a striking resemblance to Willis. Upon deeper investigation, police discovered Willis had a long history of persistently harassing vulnerable women at their workplaces. Chillingly, initial witnesses, who said nothing suspicious occurred later, recalled Willis as a bothersome regular at the Exxon. They had dismissed his attempts to flirt as harmless annoyances. But looking back, they all realized the disturbing nature of his obsessive persistence. It was a presence that had made Jessica deeply uncomfortable, a feeling that Basa now became the most horrible foreshadowing. On September 20th, 2016, the final veil of secrecy was lifted. Jeffrey Willis was officially charged with the kidnapping and murder of Jessica Hinga. Prosecutors laid out a chilling theory. They believed Willis had abducted her from the gas station, most likely forcing her into the minivan, and transported her to his grandfather's vacant home. There, Jessica endured unimaginable, depraved acts of torture before being executed with a Taurus .357 revolver. The weapon, found in Willis's vehicle, had its serial number filed off, a testament to the killer's meticulousness. But DNA analysis linked it directly to Willis. The totality of the evidence, the JLH file on his computer, the restraints, and the trove of sick videos painted Willis not as a spontaneous killer, but a monster who planned his depravity with terrifying coolness and precision. Then, a shocking twist. Kevin Bloom, Willis's cousin and a former corrections officer, admitted to involvement. He confessed to helping Willis dispose of Jessica's body after seeing it in his basement. Bloom's reluctant cooperation, born out of fear and guilt, became the golden key that solidified the entire case against Jeffrey Willis. In May 2018, Willis stood trial for Jessica's murder. Ironically, he was already serving life without parole for his previous crime, the murder of Rebecca Blech. Still, this case presented a unique legal challenge. Because Jessica's body was never found, it was a no-body murder case, a type of case considered notoriously difficult to prove. But the prosecution met the challenge with an utterly overwhelming volume of circumstantial evidence. Willis's silver minivan, the sick Vicks folder, the surveillance footage, and witness testimony all pointed to his undeniable guilt. Crucially, a former colleague testified that Willis had once boasted of researching how to dispose of a body. That testimony delivered a fatal blow to the jury. The defense team, in a final desperate attempt, argued that the lack of physical evidence, like Jessica's DNA in Willis's home, created significant reasonable doubt. They even floated the theory that she had willingly run away, bored with her life. But this desperate plea shattered against the prosecution's convincing evidence. The jury deliberated for a mere hour and a half before delivering the verdict: guilty of felony murder and first-degree kidnapping. The news was met with tears of relief by Jessica's family, who had endured years of agony. It was a victory, a form of closure. However, it still came with one haunting, painful question left unanswered. Where was Jessica's body? Kevin Bloom, who pleaded guilty to being an accessory after the fact, confessed to helping Willis bury Jessica in a remote wooded area. He led police to several locations, but the results were heartbreaking. Large-scale searches, including excavations and cadaver dogs, failed miserably. It became clear that cunning Willis had anticipated his cousin's cooperation and had later exhumed Jessica's body and moved it to a secret location. After that, all Bloom could provide were guesses. Dozens of sites were scoured, but Jessica's remains were never found. This loss became an enduring torment. Jessica's mother, Shelley Hinga, publicly vowed to continue the search. Despite the agony of not knowing where her daughter lies, the Norton Shores community also refused to surrender, with volunteers continuously organizing searches of suspected areas. Jessica's disappearance not only stole Norton Shores' innocence, but also exposed a grave flaw in night shift workplace safety. In response, Michigan passed Jessica's law in 2016, mandating increased safety measures for businesses. Today, the community still remembers her through vigils and fundraising for her son, Zan. This case is a brutal reminder of the reality of violent crime. Yet, it also shines a light on hope. From the bravery of the 16-year-old girl who escaped, the dedication of the investigators, to the unwavering resilience of Jessica's family. Still, Jessica's absence leaves an open wound. Jeffrey Willis, serving out his life sentence, remains completely unrepentant and offers no clues. The memory of this case remains a somber chapter, a testament to unresolved grief, but also a symbol of the strength of those who refuse to surrender to the darkness.